How can you control weeds in your lawn, in your garden, or in your shelter belt? We'll talk about that today during our Farm Basics time.
All throughout the year, Brand and I get questions about how do I control this weed in this very sensitive situation with a crop that there's nothing really safe to spray around, or right next to some flowers. Those are difficult calls in the middle of the growing season. However, we are afforded some opportunities in the early spring and late fall to control tough weeds even in very sensitive spots. Let's start with the garden, for example. Let's say that you've got some perennial weeds in an area that is going to be your garden for next year, but all your annual crops are done for the season. Guess what? Now you've got some tools at your disposal because you don't have to worry about hurting things. Now, if you've got perennial crops out in the garden, yes, you absolutely have to be careful for them. But if you've got annual crops, like for me, I like to raise tomatoes, no problem. I'm starting out with new plants each season. I can go into those areas with Roundup or with some real tough herbicides to control perennial weeds. And Roundup is my herbicide of choice for perennials because it's going to move down into the root system and kill that weed, root and all.
I love how Darren talks about Roundup. Yes, it's a great product. Here's my number one concern. When is that first killing frost coming? If you wait and you spray after that first killing frost, you don't have nearly as good of activity, even on a perennial weed. You might say, well, it doesn't kill the perennial. No, it doesn't, but it kills a lot of the top growth. And that's a real concern because the only way that Roundup is going to get down into the root system and kill that plant once and for all is it has to get absorbed by the leaves up above. So you not only have to get the Roundup into the plant, it then has to translocate or move from there down into that root system. So just make sure you're doing this early enough in the fall. I usually recommend people do this 1 to 2 weeks before their normal first hard killing frost.
All right, let's talk about lawns because we've got warm season grasses, cool season grasses. This time of year, the cool season grasses are really starting to dominate things, but also some of those weeds that can be a problem in the spring and the fall. Fall's a great time to control weeds in lawns because where we're at, we're going to get a freeze up in a little while. We're going to kill those weeds off. The lawn is thriving. It'll choke out anything else that comes. And then by next spring, we've got no weeds and we can start clean again. We like to use products like 2,4-D, for example. I prefer using something like Freelex that has 2,4-D choline in it. We've got much less risk of any kind of off-target vapor movement, those kinds of things. Been very happy with that. Others may use something like dicamba or other mixes. For human safety, I like 2,4-D or Freelex the best in this type of situation to control things like dandelions, clovers, and other weeds.
The reason why we talk so much about 2,4-D in the fall, and you might say, well, I don't have a lot of weeds, it looks like a lot of the top growth is dying off, it's no big deal. No, go hit it anyway, because now is the time of the year when you don't have to worry about dropping leaves off trees, you don't have to worry about killing the flowers next door or whatever, so now is absolutely the time to spray. And it's the same thing when I start thinking about shelter belts. If you're going to go out and control weeds in a shelter belt, yes, we know that 2,4-D or something like Darren suggested, Freelex, the new type of 2,4-D without all the volatility risk, that's a great product on a lot of these weeds out there, whether they are annual, biennial, winter annual, or even for that matter perennial. Sometimes 2,4-D isn't too bad on the perennials in that shelter belt situation when you want to leave the grass. You don't want to kill everything like you would with Roundup. So that's all great. It's just you would like to see the leaves drop off the trees first, then go out and spray. Then there's a lot less risk to those trees. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there isn't still some level of risk in hurting trees, especially very small ones, but generally speaking, we don't find that 2,4-D has any long-term effects on trees.
And I like the 2,4-D choline formulation, so check the labels, see which ones are labeled in your state and your particular use area. Maybe it's lawns, gardens, shelter belts like we talked about today. It could be other areas, non-crop areas, pasture, whatever. If you're trying to control weeds, we do like the 2,4-D choline. That's our preferred 2,4-D. And just check the labels of the various products that it's offered in to see which one works for you.
One of the weeds you may find in your lawn, in your garden, or in your shelter belt is our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you how to stop it coming up later in the show.